It all starts subtly. She changes her tone, withdraws her affection, avoids eye contact. Suddenly, the lightness of the beginning turns into tension, but there's no fight, no words, just a strange atmosphere. And you, without realizing it, are already trying to fix what you don't understand. You've changed. You don't understand me anymore. Do whatever you want. Simple phrases, but they carry unspoken weight. They're emotional hooks, thrown not to solve, but to pull you in. And you, trying to protect the relationship, begin doing what she wants without her having to ask. You adjust. You give in. You mold yourself, and she notices. The woman who wants control doesn't shout. She sighs, pulls away, leaves doubt hanging in the air, and the man who isn't awake rushes to fill the silence, to make sure she doesn't leave, to show he cares. And in that movement, he loses himself. He stops saying what he thinks, afraid of her reaction. He starts avoiding conflict even when something bothers him. He trades decisions for concessions. And the worst part, he starts thinking this is maturity. But it's not maturity. It's emotional submission disguised as care. The real pain isn't just being manipulated. It's looking in the mirror and no longer recognizing your posture, your firmness, your essence. It's realizing you've started living based on her mood and lost your own center. You start walking slower, breathing shorter, responding with fear. Your body adapts to the tension. Your voice becomes cautious, and the woman who once admired your firmness now looks at you with coldness, because when a man bends too much, he loses the weight of his own presence. Manipulation begins where your clarity ends. If you don't know what you tolerate, she tests it. If you don't know what you feel, she leads it. If you don't know who you are, she shapes it. And the cruelest part, you believe you're being loving, but in truth, you're being controlled. This is the beginning of disconnection, when you no longer know whether what you're doing is a choice or a reaction to the fear of losing her. And the man who lives for her approval is already trapped. But there's still time to return to center, time to remember that your role is not to guess what she wants, it's to sustain who you are. And that starts with clarity. Clarity of what you feel, of what you want, and of what you will never allow again. Manipulation doesn't look like control. It looks like conditional affection, strategic kindness, calculated absence. The woman who manipulates often isn't fully aware of what she's doing, but that doesn't make the impact any less real. Female manipulation happens on a different plane. It's not aggression, it's direction. She creates a system where every one of your actions depends on her reactions. Like an invisible maze. You move inside it, but don't realize she's holding the map. Social psychology studies explain this clearly. The female brain, more attuned to emotional reading and indirect communication, has developed subtle influence strategies throughout history. And among those strategies, the most powerful is the emotional reward and punishment system. It works like this. If you do what she wants, she draws closer. If you take a stand, she pulls away. If you please her, she opens up. If you confront, she goes silent. And without noticing, you start associating love with approval, affection with obedience, presence with submission. You become the man who reacts to the sound of her bell like a trained dog. And the worst part? You call it love. But it's emotional dependence disguised as connection. Affection becomes currency. And every choice you make is calculated based on the chance of pleasing her. You don't say what you feel, you calculate the impact. You don't choose what you want. You analyze what she'll tolerate. You don't live your truth, you live within the limits of her comfort. And that eats you from the inside. Because what should be a bond becomes a game. What should be connection becomes control. And what should be respect becomes fear. The power of manipulation is in the silence, in what's left unsaid, in the absence that wounds more than any word. She doesn't trap you with shouting, she traps you with glances, with gestures, with the feeling that if you don't adapt, she'll vanish. And when you need her presence to feel peace, you've already surrendered your freedom. But awareness is the first step, because the one who sees the game no longer plays it the same way, and the man who begins to observe without reacting has already started to break free from the invisible leash. The most common mistake men make when they realize they're being manipulated is thinking they need to confront. They believe they must argue, prove, explain, raise their voice. They step into the game with anger. They want justice. They want to defend themselves. They want her to understand. But the truth is something else. Real power doesn't live in the response. It lives in the pause, in what you don't say, in the reaction you withhold, in the expectation you break with silence. Emotional manipulation only works because you respond, because you explain yourself. Because you chase every time she pulls away. Because you change your tone, your plans, your focus to please. And what she perceives, even without rational awareness, is simple. She has control. She presses a button and you move. She disappears and you chase. She accuses and you apologize. She threatens to leave and you give in. But when you stop reacting, everything changes. She throws out the same phrase. You just observe. She gives the same silent treatment. You stay in your rhythm. She tries to provoke an emotional response, and you offer presence. It's not about ignoring. It's about not being pulled, not allowing every gesture of hers to determine how you'll feel, because the man who constantly reacts lives to please, but the man who chooses silence consciously lives to sustain. That's when manipulation loses power, when she realizes that no matter what she does, you remain, that your center doesn't shift at her touch, that you're not there to play, but to exist with steadiness. That is the end of the invisible rope, because what sustains the game is your need for acceptance. If she senses that you need her affection to go on, she holds all the weapons. But if you show, through your body and your silence, that you're there by choice, not out of need, she understands. The game is over. Firm presence is disruption. It's setting boundaries without shouting. It's commanding without conflict. And the man who doesn't react isn't cold. He is free. Not all manipulation comes with flashing red lights. It shows up in small gestures, in calculated pauses, in phrases that seem innocent but carry symbolic poison. The indifference test. She pulls away without explanation to see if you'll chase, if you'll panic, if you'll prove she still has power. It's not real rejection. It's an emotional experiment. And the more desperately you respond, the more you confirm she dominates your mind. Subtle comparison. She mentions another man, the co-worker, the ex who knew how to listen, the friend who acted like more of a man in that situation. She's not just commenting. She's placing a mirror in front of you to see if you react with insecurity. And when you take the bait, you reveal that you feel lesser, and desire evaporates. Reversed victim. She does something wrong. She lies, she disrespects, she pushes your boundaries, but when you react, she cries, plays the wounded role, as if your pain were an attack, and you, confused, emotionally unstable, find yourself apologizing for being hurt. Conditional affection. She gives you affection when you give in. She offers presence when you submit. She admires you when you adapt. But when you assert yourself, when you set a boundary, when you make your own choice, she grows cold, punishes you with silence, with distance, with that look that says, you ruined everything. These patterns aren't always conscious, but they're real, and they serve one purpose: to train you to become the man she controls through gestures. And the way to break this is not by confronting her, it's by stopping the search for meaning in her behavior, because the focus isn't to understand what she meant, it's to remember who you decided to be, and to sustain that. Even when she threatens to walk away, even when she cries, even when she provokes with absence. Don't fall for doubt disguised as tenderness. Don't respond to the test that comes with a compliment. Don't move according to her moods. The technique is simple, but it requires courage, firmness, consistency, posture. Because while she watches you, What defines everything is whether you still dance every time she changes the music, or if you've already learned to move to your own rhythm. A man's body doesn't lie. It reveals where his mind is. And when the mind is trapped in the fear of losing, the body folds, the shoulders drop. The gaze becomes restless, the voice loses strength, and he walks through the world asking for permission with his eyes, trying to please before being whole, asking for space before occupying presence. The manipulated man lives in a state of tension. He responds before thinking, tries to fix before understanding, and most of all, tries to keep the woman around at any cost, even if that cost is his own integrity. But the man with integrity carries a different energy. He doesn't force respect. He inspires it. He doesn't need to convince anyone. He simply is. His shoulders are open. His steps have rhythm. His voice isn't rushed. He knows that if silence is necessary, he can handle it. And if leaving is necessary, he leaves whole. His mind is like a blade, sharp but restrained. He observes without losing himself. He listens without absorbing everything. He feels without crawling. It doesn't matter what the woman tries: silence, indirect comments, emotional tests. He stays centered, not as someone who ignores, but as someone who chooses not to react to every stimulus, because he knows every impulsive reaction is a surrender of power, and he prefers to sustain his own field, to be the rock, not the reflection. The woman senses this. Even if she can't explain it, she feels it. She feels that this man doesn't dance to a tune he didn't choose, that he doesn't bend to anyone's moods, that he may love, but he won't sell himself for affection. And that changes everything. This man isn't cold. He is clear. He isn't indifferent. He is authentic. He isn't harsh. He is stable. He understands that protecting his essence isn't about building walls. It's about establishing presence. And presence is the kind of power no manipulation can break through. Seneca said, "No one is more enslaved than the one who believes he is free without realizing his chains." And this is the most silent trap of manipulation. You believe you're choosing. Believe you're giving in for love. Believe you're preserving the relationship. But in truth, you're adapting to a script you didn't write. Manipulation doesn't need to scream. It needs routine. It installs itself in small gestures, in loaded silences, in looks that demand a reaction. It doesn't need to lock you in a cell. It only needs to get you to lock yourself in. And the more you adjust to maintain peace, the more that peace becomes her favor, not your achievement. You begin to negotiate everything: your opinion, your time, your values, and without noticing, you become invisible even to yourself. But the key isn't to attack, it's to see. It's to stop moving every time she tests you. It's to make clear with the silence of your body that you're not for sale, that you can love without losing yourself, that you can yield without folding. When you stop reacting, she notices. When you remain unchanged, she feels it. When you continue to be who you are, even when she tries to shape you, she understands. The control is gone, and in that moment the manipulation dies, because it only exists as long as you need her approval. Without that need, there is no button to push, no bell that works, no emptiness that pulls you in. You become the game, not the pawn. Finish this with clarity. She only manipulates you as long as you still need her approval. And if that hurt, it's not weakness. It's a sign that you've started to see. Free yourself from the game. Be presence, be decision, be the rock, because the man who knows himself doesn't follow signs. He draws paths.